Going into the show, I was pretty excited. I liked the outlandish and unique take WandaVision had on the superhero genre, and from that, I had high hopes for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This was going to be a long, well-developed thriller with engaging and riveting conflicts. But the show as a whole was just very bland. I think the writing is the biggest culprit here, and the formulaic pattern of the plot became very dull and repetitive for me. The pattern was find a lead, follow up on it and have an action scene, then the bad guys escape and repeat the cycle. This basically happened every episode, and by the time the cycle repeated itself for a third time, it just became very clear that the show's core DNA of plot structure was flawed. The only interesting development within this cycle was working with Zemo. Having a primary villain become an anti-hero and him ironically becoming more likable than your primary leads is pretty impressive. And that mostly goes to Daniel Bruhl's portrayal of Zemo, which to me is by far the best aspect of the show. But this also highlights another major issue in that their primary leads aren't that captivating. For Sam Wilson, a lot of his conflict throughout the show derives from just having a bad relationship with Bucky. Their overall relationship felt way too childish at times. Like, oh, ha ha ha, it's so funny that they're having a staring competition. And then that paired with other scenes like Sam giving Bucky the silent treatment just comes off as immature and unlikable. I get there's supposed to be tension between these two characters, but that's not how you go about writing it. For Sam's conflict as a whole, only until the last 2 episodes do the writers explore the weight of inheriting the Captain America title as a black man. This would have made for a great internal conflict throughout the show, but they just pass it off as this statement for Sam not wanting the shield.
When Steve first told me about the shield, the first words I said were, "It feels like it belongs to someone else."
So besides the conflict with Bucky, the only other main personal dilemmas that Sam has to deal with is family and monetary issues. People argue that this humanizes Sam Wilson, and to a degree that's true, but the show spent way too much time in that area. They gave us a big portion of family drama in the first episode, and then for the 5th episode, they doubled down and spend like 30 minutes on that subject. No one wants to watch Sam Wilson repairing a boat for almost a whole episode, especially since this happens before the finale. It's like, okay, well, you're humanizing this character who, while not being a superhero, doesn't have a lot of interesting things going on. And to contrast this with Bucky, his personal dilemma is actually fun to follow. He has to deal with the mental anguish of being a mind-controlled assassin, and he has to make amends to give himself internal peace. That is good character development. But for Sam, it's very bare bones, and he's the lead of the show. And going into Sam's monetary conflict, they bring this up in the first episode about how his family needs more money, and that the banks aren't giving him any loans. In the long run for the show, this conflict doesn't really matter, and it feels like a waste of time. A superhero story that uses monetary conflict correctly is Spider-Man. For Peter Parker, he has to balance protecting the city, making money at his job, spending time with his family, and building up a relationship with his love interest. All of these aspects put a vast amount of tension on his character because his schedule is so busy and he has a lot of responsibility, and having to make money adds tension within that responsibility. For Sam Wilson, him spending time with his family and worrying about money just felt like a side objective that felt largely unnecessary in the overall story. So with the large amount of time they spent here in the show, especially in the boat repairing episode, I simply just got bored and contemplated skipping scenes, which I never really want to do. So looking away from the main characters, I want to discuss the villain. I can't really think of a worse villain in the MCU than Carly Morgenthau. Not only is she not compelling, but she's also just flat out annoying. There are other villains in the MCU that are very forgettable, like Malekith from Thor: The Dark World, and I'm not even sure if that's his name, I'm just gonna assume that's his name, but I don't remember him being annoying. Carly, on the other hand, is just an emotional teen who stumbled upon super strength and goes through the generic "the ends justify the means" scenario. But this time, her reasoning doesn't make sense.
You're killing innocent people.
They're not innocent. They're roadblocks in my journey and I'd kill them again if I had to.
Wow.
No, I didn't mean it like that. You tricked me into sounding like...
Like what?
This is primarily exposed with Sam's conversation with Carly and him trying to change her mind, which I thought would have been a cool turn, but then that's just interrupted by a much needed action scene. For whatever reason, John Walker had ADHD in that moment and just wanted to bust into the conversation like the Kool-Aid man. What would have made more sense was to have Lamar die earlier in the story, thus propelling John Walker to not accept peace. This would have made more sense for him to interrupt Sam in his negotiation with Carly. From there, I think the show would have been a lot better if John Walker just killed the entire organization and became the primary villain. John Walker on his own was an interesting character study about how our idols in society are not flawless. And that's how I thought the show was going until he just turned out to be good all of a sudden in the final episode. They literally leave us with him where he's basically at rock bottom, and then he shows up being a hero at the end. Why not explore the corrupt side of the government trying to enable a superhuman for their own benefit? They partially explore this concept with Isaiah Bradley and how they buried him, and it would have been more interesting if it was the same people taking advantage of John Walker. But instead, we get a terrorist organization where even the people within the organization seem to be questioning the loyalty to the cause.
Come on. So we're working with criminals now.
Also, in what world does a large portion of the population support a cause where terrorists are killing people for it? It just comes off as being very unrealistic, and they had a big missed opportunity with using John Walker as the primary villain. So in that whole front, I think they did a terrible job. So a big part of the show is the action, and I thought the choreography and everything on that front was good, but I think the overall set pieces for the action scenes were very bland in setting. It feels like a lot of the action just takes place in dull warehouses. Overall set pieces play a large role in how memorable and grand an action scene is, but for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, really the only cool action set pieces were in the first couple of episodes, like the Mile High hostage rescue scene, and the fight on the highway. Then after that it all just blends together into boring looking areas, and I guess they maybe did this to save on their budget. But yeah, overall, I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is overrated given that it has a lot of high reviews. I'm also someone who tends to really enjoy superhero movies and shows, but I couldn't really bring myself to fully enjoy this show. The main redeeming qualities of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the cool tie-in with Dora Milaje, John Walker being a great villain, the action choreography, and Zemo hanging out with the boys. I really like their whole dynamic, although it didn't really feel realistic at times, like when they kept working with Zemo even when he executed the scientist right in front of Bucky and Sam. They kinda drop that pretty quickly and they just keep working with him. However, the other aspects like the repetitive plot structure, bland action set pieces, the horrible villain, an uninteresting primary character, along with an annoying relationship with Bucky brought the show down for me. It's enjoyable, but it's nowhere near as good as everyone's saying. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I also did a review on WandaVision, which will be in the end screen. Let me know in the comments what you thought about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and have a nice day.